Hi, welcome to another episode of Spill the Ink Show. We have a very special guest today, someone who I really look up to, not just for her writing skills, but also for the person that she is. She is somebody who I have a lot of love and respect for, and I'm sure you'll be blown away by my guest on this show once you watch it end to end. It is my absolute pleasure to have Tanushree Podder on this episode of Spill the Ink Show. Born in New Delhi, Tanushree worked in the corporate sector for 8 long years before she quit the rat race to write. A well known travel writer and novelist, um, she is passionate about traveling and writing. Climate change and the environment are of special interest to her. She enjoys writing in different genres such as historical, military, crime, and paranormal genres for adults and children. She's written many nonfiction books before she started to write fiction. Today she has 18 fiction books to her name. Thorns in the Crown is her 18th novel. Some of her notable fiction books are Noor Jahan's Daughter, Spooky Stories, More Spooky Stories, Boots, Bells, Barretts, Ambapalli, and many more. Three of her books are being adapted into web series. Now, let's not waste any more time and speak to this prolific writer right away. Why do you write? Like, what does it mean to you? 18 books is still, what is that that keeps you writing?
Dina, I can't imagine a life where I can't write or, read.
Mhm.
I just don't know. Like last few days, I took a small break because I was like very tired after the whole lot of work that I've been putting in. And I thought I'll take a couple of days or say a week,
Yeah.
you know. And you won't believe it, I didn't know what to do. I read, of course,
Yeah.
but if I don't write, I feel, funny sensation that, sort of, I don't
I
know
know.
what to do with my time.
I
I'm
know.
not one for watching too many television shows or
Yeah.
whatever movies. I can
Yeah.
just watch for some time, but
Yeah.
not for a couple of days or
Correct.
something like
I know.
that.
I know.
So for me, writing is like a passion. I call it my oxygen. So you can imagine, no one can live without oxygen.
Yes.
So it's like breathing.
True. 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 I think it's well said. I think it is a way of life also for you because it's so a part of you now that you can't live without writing. So I think a true,
I have sacrificed a lot for writing. I've sacrificed a lot. So, you are a very lonely person as a writer.
true,
You can understand that a writer has to remain
solitary.
wrapped up in the thoughts so much. I have no time to, socialize so much. And as a result, I sometimes feel a little strange when I'm in a gathering or a party because I haven't attended one for quite some time. So I sort of feel that I have sacrificed a lot socially. And yes, of course, because once you are obsessed with writing, you give up a lot.
Yeah.
It
My,
calls for a lot of sacrifice.
do you like?
See, I'm not a loner,
Okay.
but I'm not too very hectic kind of a social
Social, but
person where I need to interact with people every day, every hour. No, I'm quite okay to socialize once a week or once in 10
okay.
days. And that is enough for me.
Correct. Correct.
But
Yeah.
I'm not a loner.
That's nice. That's nice to hear. So, where do you get your muse to write? I mean, what is your muse? What?
See, I feel if you really like writing, you love writing, you find ideas everywhere. And your muse is always with you.
Yeah.
So for me, the muse never deserts me.
Yeah.
And at any given time, it's a joke in our family that I have 10 ideas and I'm just raring to go on those ideas. It may be a difficult thing to progress on each one of them, but any given moment, I have so many ideas. Sometimes, I am spoiled for choice. And then, of course, I choose one of them. Then there are umpteen ideas which are half finished, they haven't taken full shape.
Yeah.
I just do some pages and then I sort of, put them in the cold freezer. And someday I again dig them out when I'm in the mood and I complete.
Then.
Like I'll tell you one of these books which is coming out next. It's again a historical
No.
book with the background of our freedom struggle.
Wow.
And this is covering a span of about 50 to 60 years,
Wow.
right from the 1920s to 1980 or so. So it covers such a lot that there is this protagonist, there are three protagonists, in fact, and their lives. So much has happened. Now, this book took me more than 20 years to write.
Wow.
And not because I didn't know what I was writing about, but I wasn't satisfied. Each time I dealt with it, I felt something was missing. I didn't like the ending, I didn't like the beginning, or something, it didn't satisfy me.
Yeah.
It was only just last year that I finally got to finish the book. And you'll be seeing it next,
Is this the
say, about
crown?
September.
Is this the title with the crown in the
Yes,
yeah,
yes. The Thorns in the Crown.
the thorns in the crown? Yes, yes. So yeah, I mean, and research. How much time does it take to research for a historical fiction or whatever genre in fiction? Um, how do you
See,
go about
you
that?
require to research. Yeah,
Yeah.
you require to research for all genre.
Okay.
But historical being so paramount in terms of date and
Right.
factual truths that, you need to spend a little more time.
Mm.
And for me, I love researching. That's a process where I learn so much, so I go
Yeah.
very deep into it. I may use just about 10% of what I research,
Yeah.
but I like to know more and more. It gives me more solid background to the story. So I love researching, and for this book especially, I think I really researched for a very long time.
Nice. And if there's one thing that you could tell to your younger self when you just started to write, what would it be?
I think I would have been wiser in my choices,
Okay.
in the sense that I just wrote at random and I just wrote whatever came to my mind. But now having come to this stage, I feel I could have, restricted myself to say two genres or three
Okay.
genres
Okay.
and maybe, focused on a single genre
Okay.
more specifically.
Okay.
But that the reason again is the marketing,
Okay.
not
Okay.
because I don't like to write in various
Uh,
genres, but
Okay.
because it's a marketing challenge.
Okay. To where to, how to promote you and where to, in which niche to put you
Yeah,
in. Yeah.
exactly.
There is this one book that I'm reading right now. It's called The One Thing. So it says the same thing, if you focus yourself on one thing and concentrate on that, your chances of success are more than if you have your fingers in so many pies, though you might be great at it. So when I think, yeah, something of that sort. I mean, it kind of took me to that. So
I
it,
agree with that. I
or,
agree with that.
yeah,
And yet, I think I would be very bored writing on
oh,
a
just one
single.
genre. No, but what they say is at least one thing at one time. So it doesn't have to be
Yes,
like one thing all your life, but it can be like one
right,
thing at one stage of your life instead of being
right.
over the place at the same time. So that's what the book
Yes,
says.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it reminded me of that. The next question, which I wanted to check to ask you was, you've written both nonfiction and fiction. So, what are the joys and challenges of writing both? the styles?
I think the research part is equally important, whether you're doing the fiction or non-fiction genre. But the imagination, the call to draw upon the inner reserves of your being, trying to explain something in which you bring to light the protagonist's life
Mm,
is so important in fiction.
mm,
And that calls for a lot of working.
mm,
It's not easy to make the reader travel to a certain era in
mm.
his mind. It
Yeah.
is not very easy to create a kind of atmosphere wherein the reader feels that he's there,
Mm,
seeing it in front of him.
mm.
Whereas in nonfiction, that is not really required.
Right. Yeah.
You just are writing about the
Yeah.
truth,
The subject.
the what is being seen by people.
Yeah.
So I think to that extent, it is a little easier.
Nonfiction, right? Yeah. And also, I think you need to step into the shoes of different characters and live them and feel them and then breathe them to life on paper, and that's tough.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, ma'am, one question is, how did you reach the stage of writing so well fiction? Is it something that you've learned through observation, through practice, or you've gone through some workshops, you've attended some, classes, or it's just looks like, or it's like a mix of all these things?
Uh, I never did any kind of training in writing.
Mm.
I don't have any degrees as far as
Correct.
writing is concerned.
Concern.
I'm a science student, pure science student. So there's no background of literature other than reading. I
Okay.
was always very keen reader right from my childhood. And my mom was the definitive, you know, kind of a direction leader in the sense that she was a postgraduate in literature
Wow.
herself,
Okay.
and she had this collection of books all over the house, and we used to hear from her stories all the time. Whatever she liked, supposing she liked a short story, she would read it out to us
Wow.
and try to develop our imagination. And soon we started sort of reading a lot, and I read in all genres. And I think it's partly the strength that comes from reading.
Mm.
The more you read, the better writer you become.
That's
I
true.
find these days a lot of youngsters are in a hurry to become
Publishing.
writers,
Yes.
and they haven't read enough. The first thing I say is first read at least 100 books minimum,
Yes.
and then think of even starting to write.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. So I feel that a lot of effort goes into writing. It is not as easy.
Yeah. So when did you start your 20s, your 30s? Like, when did you first start to?
I first wrote my short story when I was about 11.
Okay.
Okay. So it was just a very childish attempt at trying to write a story, and it was written in a rough notebook that I carried to school. So whenever I found, little time, I used to just write down. And it was a very stupid, childish story. But that was a stepping stone because I didn't tell my mom about it. But she found me writing one day and she asked me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm writing a story." So she read it and she said, "Not bad. I think you could do better and polish it up," and all that. So she was a very big guiding force and encouraged me. And since then, I started dabbling in the writing of various thoughts that came to my
Yeah.
mind. And I was a journalist for a while, and I wrote for many of these. In
Okay.
fact, I was working for Magna for a year.
Okay.
That is the group that takes out Savvy Society and
You
all.
know that. Okay.
So I have worked with them with Ingrid Albuquerque. And so, that was just to, polish my
I know.
journalistic instincts.
Yeah.
What goes behind publishing? As a freelancer, you really don't understand. So
Yes.
it was for that I took up the job. So I have been a journalist for a long time, and I wrote all kinds of things like short stories, humor pieces, interviews, travelogues. And then I graduated to writing books. So it wasn't a one step affair where you just go
Yeah.
into writing.
Yes, yes. So your first fiction, like your first fiction book was in which phase of your life, like your 20s or 30s? I'm just trying to see when
No,
did.
that is what, yeah, I got into writing books quite late.
Hmm.
I didn't have my children were growing up. I didn't
Yeah.
have the time to focus on my writing, and a
Hmm.
book takes a long time. And
Yes.
my husband he's just retired, and he was in the armed forces. So we were, you know, traveling to far-flung areas where there were no resources, and all this was quite a challenge. So I didn't dabble into writing books till I my children had completed their schooling, and then after that I was a little free to focus on my writing, and then I took up writing. So my first book was Nurjahan's Daughter,
Yeah.
and that was published in 2006 or 2008, around that
Okay.
time.
Nice, because I buy a lot of these books on craft, the writing craft. So there's one writer who says that you shouldn't write until you are in your 30s because you're still too young before that to write. You need to observe life, you need to absorb, you need to practice, and then get into fiction. That's what he feels, and it kind of made me feel good because we all start late because we have our kids to look into. And I was like, okay, fine. The more experience you have with time, the more you gain from that, and then you can add
I
more.
agree. I agree totally with that, because as you mature, your outlook towards life, changes.
Yes.
You see things a little differently,
Mm.
and you know the emotions people feel and their reaction to certain situations. And you have lived quite a bit of life till
Yes.
then. You've
Yes.
seen all kinds of challenges, and dealt with a lot of
Yes.
pressures and a lot of
Yes.
things. And I totally believe that the more mature you are, the better you write. Like, I know my best is yet to come.
Yeah. That's
So it's always a learning process. You hone your craft, you get better and better with each book.
okay. And which genre, after all these years, do you feel most at home with? Like, where do you feel like this is it? Like, this is my space. Like, this is where I belong. Or
Unfortunately, I haven't.
you're still
That's
exploring.
why,
You like to try different things.
I'm just like, it's like this when I'm writing a kid's book, like, spooky stories. I'm so much into it. But
But
by
yeah,
the way, that has got so much of history in it, if you
yes,
realize.
yeah,
It's based on historical,
right,
places, accounts, and uh, some events that took place.
yeah,
So when I'm into writing that, I'm totally lost in that. And when I'm writing historicals, I'm lost in the historicals, and I enjoy each moment. The beauty is that I enjoy writing in each genre. So I
yeah.
haven't yet,
You
found a particular niche.
you feel at home in each genre.
Yes,
You find you
absolutely.
are comfortable, absolutely at home.
I'm comfortable.
That's lovely to hear. That's really nice. So let's talk about your latest book, this beautiful
Yes.
book, Papalli. So, yeah, Papalli. So, tell me more about this book. This cover. Uh, how did this come about? Because for some reason, it takes me to the movie Kantara. I don't know if you've heard of this. So it's got this whole feel to it. So was it like intentional or
See,
specifically?
uh, this is a specific art form
Okay,
which is there in Bihar.
okay, okay, okay,
Okay. So, and the illustrator visualized it as Ambapali's many qualities. If you see those petals,
okay. Yeah,
it
yeah.
is like many traits that she had.
Okay,
The
this
kind of,
one.
her then leanings towards learning, her leaning towards, spirituality,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
her diplomacy and the art forms.
Hmm.
So it sort of depicts everything.
Hmm.
And the whole thing was, to use this Madhubani art,
Art. Yeah.
Madhubani paintings you might have seen. So
Yes,
this
yes,
is that
yes.
art form. And
Mhm.
if you look at it, you open it, it is the full
I know. It's
face.
beautiful. It's a
Yeah,
beautiful,
yeah,
stunning cover
it is.
and full justice to the story. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a stunning book.
I feel the covers are so important, you know,
Yeah.
the book covers, and I take a lot of interest in the
Okay.
book covers.
So you do
And
have an
I'm very,
active part. You take an
yeah,
active
so
part.
whenever, absolutely. So when they send me the, say three or
Samples.
four specimens that what do you think of these, then I give them my ideas,
Okay.
and tell them if the font is okay, if the color, I would prefer the color some other way.
Yeah.
Then they justify and they tell me, like for this one also there were
Yeah.
different colors. There
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
one with the yellow background,
Yes.
ochre yellow,
Yeah.
and one was there with a blue background. And we
Okay.
finally chose this red one because
Yeah.
it was so striking with the red and yellow.
Yellow. Yeah. 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 It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And also the opening is one of the most stunning ones that I've read in a novel, in a book. It's a poetry, right? A poem called, it's a specific form. I think it's called, let me just say,
See,
Therigatha.
Therigatha,
Therigatha. Yeah,
that
yeah.
is the book of the elder nuns.
Oh,
If you
yeah.
translate, it means
Yes.
the book of elder nuns.
Yes.
And Ambapali has composed those verses herself.
Okay. Oh,
It is
okay.
a composition made by her.
Okay.
It
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not very commonly known, but
Mm-hmm.
this she was one of the Therigatha
Poets.
creators.
Oh,
And
wow.
that shows the kind of knowledge and intellectual capabilities that she had.
Yeah.
Now, that was a little tough for me to get the translation because the original is in the Prakrit
Just the language.
language.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, of that era, at that time, of that region. Now, I was in touch with quite a few, scholars,
Mm-hmm.
Buddhist scholars,
Mm-hmm.
who have translated into English.
Mm.
And if you see in my
It's
acknowledgements, I have given that
yes.
name,
Yeah.
Margot.
Okay. Okay.
So she was the one. I contacted quite a few people. So
Okay.
this Margot McLaughlin, she
Hmm.
was the one
Okay.
whose thing I finally used
Okay.
translation.
Wow. Wow.
So I asked for her permission, and you won't believe how well I benefited from her.
Hmm.
Because in the initial script, where the
Hmm.
first draft when I wrote, I
Hmm.
had sort of put Ambapali writing it.
Hmm.
And Margot reminded me that it was all oral.
Hmm.
There's no written history at that time. So,
Yeah.
whatever history we have from that time is in oral form.
Oh, yeah.
So, anyone who says that it was in writing is
Hmm.
actually not factual. It is
Hmm.
not factual. So,
Hmm.
she told me, Tanushree, there is one thing I want to point out, that it was all oral. And
Hmm.
that's how then I changed the draft and I went and said it
Trans
as she's
poet.
singing it.
It's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. I was just in
So
awe of that. And just the choice to have that as the opening, like to pick that moment and that way of starting your book is something which was like, it just sucks in the reader and just wows them. It just blows them
there
completely.
is a reason, Dina, because see, she was one of the most beautiful women in the
Hmm.
entire Jambudweep. And
Yeah.
Jambudweep those days was not just India, it was
Hmm.
also a lot of Southeast Asia and all those
Yeah.
countries.
Oh, okay.
So when you say she was one of the most beautiful in Jambudweep, it
Hmm.
means a lot of beauty and power. She
Yeah.
was also a very powerful person
Hmm.
because the nobles and the royalty used to visit her
Yeah. Yeah.
and they used to compete for her attentions.
Hmm.
So for her to come to this stage when she's dying, she's all shriveled up and
Yeah.
she's ailing and she's old. So she's comparing that this is the truth.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this is where the Buddhism came in.
Yes.
The spirituality that she shows in those poems
Yes.
is a product of her Buddhist
Mhm.
belief.
Yeah.
And so it brings the reader to exactly, if you read carefully, you know what she's trying to tell you.
Yeah. And
That in
why?
the end,
Yeah,
every human being is just,
I know.
going to get old, and
Yeah.
whatever pride we have,
Yeah.
whatever vanity we have, will all disappear.
The enduring part about her is she's a very sweet, very simple girl who was pushed into this, this world of power and ambition, which she didn't have any connection or interest in at all. And you really feel for her, from the start to the end, your heart goes out to her. This is such a, I mean, she's a very sweet little thing, but life has pushed her into the worst of times, and what we see is not what she's going through.
To my mind, I think I like to think of her as a very innocent
Yes.
village kind of a girl, because she
Yes.
was the gardener's daughter,
Yeah. Yeah.
adopted, but she was a
Yeah.
gardener's daughter, brought up by him.
Mm.
And she all she wanted to do is have a house with
Mm.
a husband
Husband and
and
kids.
children.
Yes.
She didn't
Yes.
have ambitions of power and
Yes. Nothing.
anything, and
Nothing.
she was not even aware of her beauty actually.
Yes.
And
Yes.
but she loved dancing,
Yes.
and that's where she got into trouble. And she was very beautiful.
Mm.
So what happened is she could not find love in her life at all, true
Mm.
love.
Yeah. The thing that
And
she
the
wanted
boy
the
she
most,
loved,
and the thing that she wanted the most, she just couldn't have that.
yeah, it
Mm.
didn't happen to her. And at certain level, you realize even today this happens, the
Yes.
exploitation of women,
That's true.
and
That's
how
true.
they're fighting with their back against the wall,
Yes.
against a
Yes.
society which is, still repressing
Yeah.
the women and, their thought process in some way or the other. So
Yeah.
we're still fighting the same battles in many
Yeah.
ways. So if
Yeah.
you see, nothing much has changed over the centuries.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's also a very strong part of the whole theme.
She was not just simple, she was also very wise. She was also very strong, courageous, and she had a very strong sense of the right and the wrong, that strong
Yes,
discernment of, in integrity. So she had all that, and I think what life put her to was so unfair because at every time she's like being hopeful and hopeful, but yet her story is something that is so beautiful and inspiring because no matter, she's like this lotus in a dirty mud. Like, it can be
yeah, that is
filthy
the
around,
entire, yeah,
it can be
that's
filthy
what is
around
depicted
the
here.
lotus. Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So she's like this lotus that is beautiful, and people just can't see beyond her beauty because that is
Her
like a,
beautiful beauty.
it's like a curse. Her beauty is actually her curse. I mean, though,
Absolutely. See, while I have read a lot about her in the Buddhist and this thing, Jain scriptures, whatever little stories are available, but there's no detailing, there is no specific description about her life.
hmm,
Just that she adopted Buddhism,
hmm,
and this is, the fable
yeah,
behind her name.
yes,
Other than that, it's all what I thought was,
yeah,
in my mind, Ambapali was in that form.
hmm, yeah. So, then, would you say that people read more of nonfiction and less of fiction these days? And what are your thoughts on that? Would you agree, not
Uh,
agree?
uh, I really don't know. Statistics show us that nonfiction sells more than fiction.
Yeah.
So I guess it is true. But while that may be true, I think it's a very tragic kind of situation where people choose to read one kind, because
Mm,
fictions are so empowering in a
I
sense
agree.
that in a non-fiction you
Yes.
read about a certain subject only.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you're reading about, say, 500 BC, you would be only reading either the political or
Yes.
the social this thing,
Yes.
but
Yes.
you would know everything about them.
Correct. Correct.
Whereas in a fiction, you know so much, you learn so much
I
more,
agree.
because as a fiction writer, I delve into the depths and I read so many books on the same subject to
Yes,
bring out a little nuanced, characteristic or whatever, situation. So I think fiction is so empowering, and it also enables to know so much. So while fiction, non-fiction is good, definitely, but I think people should also realize that fiction is equally important, if not more.
exactly. I completely, wholly agree with that. And also, as a reader, I think it's a much more wholesome. It's much more interesting than seeing a TV show or the movie, or and you learn so much more than when you just read a dry nonfiction. I mean, that's what I feel. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Look, human emotions,
yeah,
the psychology, everything that you read in a fiction, don't come across that
no,
in either
yeah,
non-fiction
yeah.
or even TV shows to that extent.
Yeah, because I see people just, some of them, this snootily say that I don't have time to read fiction. I don't
Yeah,
like
which
fiction,
is not really.
which is okay,
No.
but then they need to know, I mean,
Mm.
they haven't discovered the joys of wholesome fiction book and how it can enhance their lives in ways that they can never even imagine. So I think
Absolutely. The amount of time we, spend on our social media or
exactly.
WhatsApp, if you
Mm.
just take out 10% of that
Correct.
and read, you can
Correct.
read.
The more you read, the faster you get. It becomes like a habit for you, and you just enjoy the whole experience.
It's a life skill. It is a
Yeah,
life, skill, I feel,
yeah,
because it enhances your ability to translate people's reactions.
yes,
So whichever, job you are in,
yeah.
it's all got to do with human psychology and human
True.
emotions at the end of
Yes,
the day, whether
yes,
you're in marketing or HR or whatever.
yes, absolutely. And now the last question for the day, because we just have a short duration for this time. Uh, your all-time favorite book and author? Or
That's a
you can
very
just say a
difficult
few,
question.
or you can just name a few, a top of the mind books that that have left a big impact on you, and the authors that have inspired you.
Uh, Tina, it keeps changing with
Time.
each age
Okay.
group that
Okay.
trans, it
Yeah.
transforms from one choice to the other.
Yes.
Supposing you are a teenager, as a teenager, you won't believe I read so much of Perry Mason and Earl Stanley Gardner, and I would have sworn by that.
Yeah.
Then Ayn Rand.
Oh,
Then,
yeah.
so forth. You
Yeah.
develop
You
your different
taste your taste.
tastes,
Yeah.
and each stage I have had favorite authors.
Yeah.
But one author that has remained constant with me is P.G. Woodhouse. It's
Okay.
strange. A lot of people think it's childish, but I love his books.
Yeah.
Every time I feel a little sad or
That
something,
okay.
all I do is just pick up a P.G.
Maybe
Woodhouse and
that's
read it. So
so.
I would list him as one of my top favorites.
It's
And
okay.
then there are so many really. I can't even begin to list them.
Okay. And one like okay, one must read book that you would recommend to our viewers, like something that you would recommend them to read.
The satires are very important to read.
Mhm.
And George Orwell did it better than anyone else, I feel.
Mm.
Like Animal Farm or even 1984
Before.
is so relevant even now,
Yes,
even today.
yes.
Today's era where we are living in this world under a certain political system or whatever, I think it's still relevant.
True.
So I feel that is one book I'll recommend everyone
Is
reads of his.
uh, one message that you would tell people who are watching the show about your books, and what would you recommend them to pick up first?
Maybe
Ambapali itself.
Ambapali, because
Okay.
I think it sort of is a sum total of many things,
Okay, yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I
history
agree.
and
It's a wholesome book. It's a completely wholesome book. And I also want to know, is this going to go to the screens? Because I would love to see this on the big screen someday.
Dina, that has come to me from so many people.
It has
So
to go
many
to the big
people have
screen.
said it,
This deserves
but
to be
I
on the big
don't
screen.
know.
I mean,
Yeah, but I don't know. I
oh,
feel it's fate,
yeah, I know.
whatever happens to it.
I wouldn't be surprised if someday somebody picks this up and makes a
Yeah, I
grand
hope some
movie out
producer
of it.
is listening to this
Yeah,
conversation.
I mean, it deserves to be on the big screen and seen on a big scale with all those dances and the big coats and all. It's
Yes,
beautiful.
yes.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope
But
so.
yeah, thank you, ma'am, for being on the show. And hopefully, we will have you again some other time for some other book, maybe in future. And I wish you all the best in
Thank you,
writing.
Tina. It was lovely being here, and thank you for having me up here.
Yeah.
And of course, I look forward to having another conversation soon with you on some other book, some other topics.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. This was a masterclass in writing, if you ask me. I cannot wait to drop in the next episode of Spilling Show with another special guest very soon. So stay tuned, folks.